I thought family was supposed to be there for you. I was wrong. That was the thought that lingered in my mind as I sat at the dinner table, the holiday decorations twinkling around me, yet a cold emptiness settled deep in my chest. Christmas had always been my favorite time of year. I spent hours decorating the house, buying thoughtful gifts for everyone, making sure every meal was perfect. This year, I had prepared a beautiful dinner, hoping for the warmth of family around me. I had set the table with care, placed the turkey in the oven, and even baked my famous pecan pie. It was all going to be perfect, or so I thought. The doorbell rang, and my heart lifted. My son, David, and his wife, Emily, were here. But there was something different in the air tonight, something I couldn't put my finger on. I greeted them with a smile, though deep down, I could feel the unease stirring. The warmth of the moment was fleeting. As we all sat down to eat, Emily handed me a small envelope, her smile polite but distant. "Dear Mom," she said. I thought it was just a Christmas card, something sweet. But when I opened it, my world seemed to freeze. "Roses are red, violets are blue. You're a burden this Christmas, and we don't want you." My fingers trembled as I read the words, the weight of them sinking into my chest like a stone. I looked up, expecting some sort of joke, but Emily's eyes were cold, not even a flicker of guilt. She wasn't joking. David sat there, his eyes fixed on his plate, avoiding my gaze. No apology, no explanation, just silence. I felt the room close in on me, the space between us growing wider with each passing second. I had always been the one who kept our family together. I had hosted every holiday, cooked every meal, and ensured that everyone felt welcome. But now, it felt as if I was invisible, a burden, a nuisance. The words on the card stung, but it was the silence that cut the deepest. I had spent years taking care of everyone else, putting my own needs last. And now, here I was, being told that I didn't belong. I had always thought family was about love and support, but what had I gotten in return? I had given so much, only to be cast aside, treated like an inconvenience. I'm just too much, I thought bitterly. Too old, too slow, too much of a burden. Emily and David, they didn't understand. They didn't see how hard I had worked to keep everything together, to make sure they had everything they needed. All they saw was someone they could discard when they no longer needed me. I stood up from the table, my mind racing. I couldn't stay there, couldn't sit through the rest of the dinner with that card still in my hands, mocking me. I excused myself, walking out of the room before the tears could fall. I needed to be alone, to gather myself. The weight of the card felt heavier with every step. As I stepped into the quiet of the hallway, my thoughts were a whirlwind. I had always prided myself on being strong, on being the rock for my family. But now, I was crumbling. I had to do something. I couldn't just let this go. Not this time. I walked to the living room, where the Christmas tree stood, its lights twinkling in the dark. I stared at it for a moment, as if trying to find some sense of peace among the chaos in my mind. And then, I made a decision. I was done. Done with pretending. Done with putting their needs before my own. I had sacrificed so much for them. And for what? To be humiliated on Christmas night? To be treated like I was disposable? No, I was stronger than this. I had lived a full life, and I wasn't going to let anyone treat me like I was nothing. I wasn't going to beg for love or affection from people who didn't see my worth. I walked back into the dining room, my steps steady, my heart calm. Emily and David were still sitting there, not speaking, but their eyes followed me as I moved. I reached for my coat, my fingers no longer shaking. "Where are you going?" Emily asked, her voice laced with indifference. "I'm leaving," I said quietly but firmly. "I'm done." I didn't need to explain myself to them. I had done enough. The family I had tried so hard to keep together had abandoned me. But that was their choice, not mine. I walked out the door, leaving behind the house that had once been a symbol of warmth and love. As I stepped out into the cold night, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the expectations, free from the constant giving, free from the feeling that I had to earn their love. I had nothing left to prove. I was going to live the rest of my life for me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never let anyone make me feel like a burden again. I walked out of the house, the cold winter air hitting my face like a slap, but it didn't hurt. It felt like a release, like finally stepping out of a cage I had been in for years. I had spent so much of my life giving and giving to a family that no longer cared, and in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need them. I had spent so many years trying to prove my worth, trying to be the one who held everything together, and all it had gotten me was a feeling of emptiness. But now, as I walked away from the house that had been my life, I felt lighter, freer. I wasn't just walking away from that dinner table or the cruel words that Emily had said. I was walking away from everything. I had always been the one who kept the family together. I had cooked every holiday meal, organized every family gathering, made sure everyone had what they needed. And what did I get in return? A Christmas card with a cruel message from my daughter-in-law. It wasn't just the card that hurt. It was everything leading up to it. It was the years of being ignored, the subtle hints that I was too old, too slow, too much of a burden. I had seen the way Emily looked at me, the way David barely looked at me anymore. It was all coming to a head, and it hurt. But as I walked away, something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to beg for their love or approval anymore. I wasn't going to let them make me feel small. I was going to live for me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life. I was no longer going to be the one who gave and gave until I had nothing left. It was time for me to take what was rightfully mine. I had spent years taking care of everyone else, putting their needs above mine, and now I was done. I had to focus on myself. I had to find my own happiness. As I walked down the street, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I had spent so many years in the background, always in the shadow of my son and daughter-in-law, always doing things for them, always trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect grandmother, the perfect wife. But now I was free. I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. I didn't have to stay in a place where I wasn't appreciated. I could do what I wanted when I wanted. For the first time, I felt like I had a future. I didn't know exactly what that future would look like, but I knew it was going to be mine. As I walked, I could feel the weight of the decision I had made. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to let them continue to make me feel like I didn't belong. It was time to take control of my own story. I could already picture my life without the constant disappointment, without the subtle insults, without the cold stares. I would find a new purpose, something that made me happy. I didn't need anyone else to validate me. I was enough just as I was. The wind picked up, and I wrapped my coat tighter around me, but I wasn't cold anymore. I was warm with the certainty that I was doing the right thing. I was no longer living for anyone else. I was living for me, and that was all I needed. I didn't look back as I walked away from the house. The lights of the Christmas tree shimmered behind me, but they felt like a distant memory now, something that no longer belonged to me. The cold night air bit at my skin, but it felt strangely comforting. For the first time in years, I wasn't suffocating in the expectation of others. I wasn't trapped in a role I didn't choose. I was free, and with that freedom came a weight I hadn't expected. A weight that made me pause for a moment, standing on the sidewalk, looking down at my shoes as if they might guide me to some new place. But where was I going? I didn't have a clear answer, but I knew I couldn't stay there, in that house that had become a prison for my heart. As I walked down the street, I realized I didn't need to have it all figured out. For once, it was okay not to have a plan, not to know exactly what the future held. I was tired of the constant disappointment, the subtle insults, the feeling that I was invisible in my own family. For years, I had tried so hard to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect grandmother. I had been there for every birthday, every Christmas, every family event, always trying to create the perfect family environment. And yet, when I needed them the most, when I reached out for just a little love and support, I was met with cruelty. It wasn't just the card. It wasn't just the words Emily had written. It was the years of being sidelined, being treated like I was no longer important. I thought back to the Christmases, the family gatherings, all the times I had hosted, all the meals I had cooked, and I realized they never truly saw me. Not the way I saw them. Not with love, not with appreciation. They saw me as someone to take care of things, someone to take care of them. And once I had no more to give, I was cast aside. I stood still for a moment on the sidewalk, staring at the lights of the houses around me. They looked so warm, so full of life, yet my own home felt empty now. I didn't have anyone left who truly saw me for who I was. Not just the caretaker, the provider, the one who held everything together. It was like I had become invisible. I had spent my life taking care of others, putting their needs before mine. And in the end, I was left with nothing but the realization that I had given so much, but they didn't care. It wasn't just the card. It was the years of neglect, the small comments, the way they always looked right through me. I had spent so much of my life trying to prove I was worthy of their love, but now I saw it for what it was. I had been sacrificing myself for people who couldn't see me anymore. I felt a wave of anger rise within me, but it was not the kind of anger that makes you lash out. No, this was different. This was the kind of anger that fueled a deep resolve. It wasn't just about the card. It was about everything that led to that moment. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. I was done. I walked down the street with my head held high, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet night. I didn't know where I was going, but I was going. I was leaving behind the hurt, the betrayal, and I was moving forward, step by step, into a future that was mine to claim. I didn't need them. I didn't need their validation, their approval. I had spent so long being who they wanted me to be, but now, I was going to be me. I was going to live for me. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had lived through harder things. I had raised my children, supported my family, and I had loved them with all my heart. But now, it was time to love myself. I kept walking, not knowing where the road would take me, but knowing that wherever I went, it would be my choice. I didn't have to answer to anyone. The world was wide, and I was free to find my place in it. And as I walked, I realized that the best part of it all wasn't the freedom. It wasn't the walking away from my old life. It was the realization that I had made it this far. I had survived their cruelty, their neglect, and I had come out stronger. I was going to be okay. And that was all I needed to know. I didn't know how long I had been walking, but the streets felt familiar, yet completely foreign. The city around me seemed to buzz with life, but I was disconnected from it, like I was floating in my own world. It wasn't until I reached the park that I realized how far I had come. I paused for a moment, taking in the stillness of the night. The trees, bare and empty, reached up into the dark sky, their branches like outstretched arms, waiting for something. Maybe it was for me. Maybe it was for anyone who needed a place to gather their thoughts. I sat on the nearest bench, feeling the cold metal against my skin, but it didn't bother me. Nothing bothered me anymore. As I sat there, I thought about everything that had led me to this point. The Christmas dinner, the card, Emily's cold smile, David's silence. For so long, I had been a part of their lives, doing everything I could to make them happy, to make them proud. I had sacrificed so much, given so much of myself, and in return, I got nothing. They had taken my time, my love, my effort, and never once thought about what it had cost me. I could feel the anger rising again, but this time, it wasn't the destructive kind. This wasn't anger that would make me shout, cry, or break things. No, this was different. This was the kind of anger that made you calm, made you realize your worth, made you understand that you had the power to change things. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for their validation anymore. I had been doing that for too long, and all it had gotten me was heartbreak. I was done being the one who always tried to fix everything, always tried to please everyone. I had nothing left to give, and now I was going to take something back. I wasn't sure what that something was yet, but I knew it was mine to claim. I had spent so many years living in the shadows of my family, always putting them first, always making sure they had what they needed. But where had that gotten me? Nowhere. I had spent my life serving others, but I had never truly served myself. I had never put myself first, never allowed myself the luxury of living for me. But now, that was about to change. I stood up from the bench, the cool breeze lifting my hair as I walked away from the park. I didn't know where I was going, but it didn't matter. I was free. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally understood something. I didn't need them. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was worth something. I already knew. I had always known. It had just taken me this long to remember. As I walked through the city streets, I made a promise to myself. I would no longer live my life for anyone else. I wasn't going to spend another day waiting for approval, waiting for someone to recognize my worth. I was going to find my own path, my own happiness, and I was going to do it on my terms. The world was full of possibilities, and I was going to embrace them all. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, there would be moments of doubt, but I was ready for them. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life. I didn't need their love or their approval to feel complete. I had everything I needed inside me. I had strength. I had resilience. And most importantly, I had myself. I didn't know what the future held, but I was excited to find out. As I walked on, I felt the weight of the past lifting off my shoulders, piece by piece. It was no longer mine to carry. I had let go of the resentment, the anger, the bitterness, and now I could breathe again. I was no longer defined by my family, by their expectations, or by their cruelty. I was defined by who I chose to be, and that was enough. The city around me felt different now. It felt like it was mine, full of possibilities and new beginnings. I had stepped into a new chapter of my life, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to live it fully. I didn't know what was ahead, but I knew it was going to be something good. I had left the past behind, and now, I was walking into my future with my head held high. I woke up the next morning to an unusual sense of calm. The chaos of the night before, the hurt, the disappointment, seemed distant now. I had walked away from everything, and somehow, the world seemed quieter, more peaceful. I lay in bed for a moment, just listening to the silence, savoring the absence of conflict, the absence of expectations. I had always been the one who held everything together, the one who made sure the family didn't fall apart. But now it was time to let go. I didn't know where to go next, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't need a plan. I could just be. I sat up and glanced around the small apartment I had rented. It was modest, but it was mine. There were no expectations here. There were no hidden agendas. No more pretending to be something I wasn't. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was shining brightly, casting long shadows across the streets. The world outside was alive, full of possibilities, and for the first time, I felt like I could be part of it. I didn't have to stay in the background anymore. I didn't have to wait for someone else to validate me. I was free to find my own way. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from my son, David. I stared at it for a moment, unsure whether to read it. After everything that had happened, part of me didn't want to know what he had to say. But curiosity got the best of me, and I opened the message. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over? There's something important I need to say." My heart skipped a beat. What could he possibly want now? After everything, why did he want to talk to me? I had walked away from that dinner table for a reason. I didn't need their drama, their manipulation, anymore. But something inside me stirred. Maybe it was the hope that he would finally see what had been going on, that he would finally understand how much I had sacrificed for him, for them. Maybe he was ready to take responsibility for his part in all of this. Or maybe he just wanted to make sure I didn't cause trouble, that I didn't disrupt their lives anymore. I didn't know. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. Should I go? Should I give him a chance? Or should I keep walking down this new path I had started, without looking back? I thought about the years I had spent trying to make my family happy, trying to make them see me, to make them appreciate what I had done. And I realized I wasn't going back. Not to that house. Not to those people who took me for granted. I wasn't going to allow myself to be part of their world anymore. I wasn't going to wait for them to come around. I was going to live for me, and if they couldn't accept that, then I was done. I deleted the message. It was time to move on. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. All I needed was myself. As I closed the phone and placed it on the counter, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had made the right choice. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I didn't need to answer to anyone. I was going to live my life the way I wanted. And in that moment, I knew something important. I had been walking away for so long, but now, I was finally walking toward something. Toward freedom. Toward the future I could create for myself. It didn't matter that it was uncertain. It didn't matter that I was alone. What mattered was that I was finally living for me, for the first time in years. I stepped out of the apartment, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. The world was wide open, and I was ready to embrace it. I didn't know what was ahead, but I knew one thing. I was strong enough to face it. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for permission. I wasn't waiting for approval. I was going to take control of my life, no matter what. And that was all I needed to know. I spent the next few days in a haze of quiet reflection. The apartment was small, but it felt like the most peaceful place I had ever known. The clutter of my old life, the years of expectations and disappointments, seemed to fade away with each passing hour. I didn't have a plan. I didn't need one. I was living in the moment for the first time in years, and it felt liberating. I had left the past behind, but it wasn't as easy as just walking out the door. There were echoes of my old life that still lingered, like the sound of family laughter, the hum of a holiday meal being prepared, the smell of coffee brewing in the morning. Those memories were comforting, yet they also reminded me of how much I had given to a family that never truly saw me. As I sat by the window, looking out at the bustling city below, I thought about the years I had spent trying to hold everything together. My son, David, had always been the center of my world. I had loved him with all my heart, but somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the process. I had become so focused on making him happy, on making sure he had everything he needed, that I had forgotten about my own needs. And Emily. Emily had come into our lives and slowly chipped away at everything I had worked so hard to build. At first, I had tried to be understanding, tried to welcome her into the family with open arms. But over time, I saw her true nature. The way she subtly undermined me, the way she used my love for David to manipulate me, it all became clear. I had allowed it to happen because I believed that family was supposed to be about sacrifice, about putting others first. But at what cost? I had given everything, and in return, I had been pushed aside, made to feel like I was nothing. Now, I could see it for what it was. I had been taken for granted. I had been used, and I had allowed it. The realization hit me harder than I expected, but it also made me stronger. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. I wasn't going to let Emily and David dictate my worth. I wasn't going to stay silent and play the part of the martyr. I had spent so many years hiding my true feelings, burying my anger and hurt for the sake of keeping the peace. But now I was done. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I didn't know what my future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be anyone's fool anymore. I stood up from the window and walked to the kitchen. The apartment was small, but it had everything I needed. I opened the fridge and took out some fruit, deciding to make a smoothie. It felt good to make my own decisions, to do things because I wanted to, not because someone expected me to. As I blended the fruit, I thought about what was next. I could feel the anger still bubbling inside me, but it wasn't the kind of anger that made me want to lash out. No, this was different. This was the kind of anger that pushed me forward, that made me want to reclaim my life, to take control of my future. I had spent so many years living for other people, but now it was time to live for me. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the next chapter of my life would look like, but I was ready to find out. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to make mistakes, to try new things, to take risks. I wasn't going to let fear hold me back anymore. I finished my smoothie and sat down at the small dining table. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow across the room. It felt like a new beginning, like the world was opening up in front of me. I wasn't alone anymore. I had myself, and that was all I needed. I picked up my phone, feeling a little hesitant as I thought about reaching out to David. Part of me still wanted his approval, wanted him to see that I was not the woman he thought I was, the woman who would always be there for him, no matter what. But another part of me knew that it didn't matter. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I was my own person now, and if David couldn't see that, then it was his loss. I deleted his contact from my phone. I didn't need to keep holding on to a relationship that had been one-sided for so long. As I put the phone down, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past was behind me. The future was wide open. And for the first time, I was excited to see what was next. I spent the next few weeks in a blur, but it was a blur of freedom. Every day felt like a fresh start, an opportunity to rediscover who I was outside of the roles I had played for so long. I started taking walks every morning, just me and the city. The air was crisp and the streets were quiet, but there was something peaceful about it. I didn't have to rush anywhere. I didn't have to do anything for anyone. It was a luxury I had never allowed myself. I went to a local cafe one morning, the kind with the old wooden tables and the scent of fresh coffee in the air. I sat by the window with a latte, watching the people pass by. There was something soothing about the rhythm of life outside. No one was asking me to do anything. No one was waiting for me to fix anything. For the first time in a long time, I could just be. As the days passed, I found myself filling my time with things I had always wanted to do but had put off for years. I started reading again, picking up books I had left untouched on my shelves. I began painting, something I had loved to do when I was younger but had abandoned over the years. I also took up gardening. There was a small patch of dirt outside my apartment, and I started planting flowers. It felt good to nurture something again, to see something grow under my care. It was a simple, quiet life, but it was mine. It was my choice. I wasn't tied to anyone's expectations anymore. One afternoon, as I was out in the garden, I received a call from my old friend, Linda. She was someone I had known for years, but over time, we had drifted apart. I hadn't spoken to her in months, maybe even years. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what she might want. But when I picked up the phone, her voice was warm, and she asked how I was doing. I could hear the genuine concern in her voice. "Maggie, are you okay? I've been thinking about you." I felt a lump form in my throat. It had been so long since anyone had asked me that, really asked how I was doing. Not for any reason, not to fulfill an obligation, but just because they cared. I felt a rush of emotions, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm doing okay, Linda. I'm better than I've been in a long time." We talked for a while, and by the end of the conversation, I realized that there were people in my life who still cared about me. There were still people who saw me for who I was, not just for what I could do for them. That night, I went to bed with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't alone. I had friends, I had a life, and I had myself. And that was enough. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to take a drive out of the city. I needed a change of scenery, something to remind me of the beauty in the world. I drove for hours, the highway stretching out in front of me, the landscape changing as I went further from the city. I ended up in a small town by the water, a place I used to visit years ago when I was younger. It felt like stepping into a memory, but it was also a fresh start. The air smelled different here, cleaner, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was calming. I spent the day walking along the beach, my feet sinking into the sand, the wind tugging at my hair. There was something about the vastness of the ocean that made me feel small, but not in a bad way. It made me realize how big the world was, how much I still had to explore, and how much time I had left. The days after that trip were filled with small adventures. I started meeting new people, not with any expectations, just for the sake of meeting them. I joined a book club, and I started volunteering at a local shelter. It wasn't about filling some void or proving something to anyone. It was about finding connection again, finding meaning in the small, everyday moments. But even as I began to rebuild my life, there were moments when the past would catch up with me. I would think about David and Emily, about the family I had left behind, and the years of sacrifice that had led to that Christmas night. It wasn't easy to forget, and I didn't expect to forget. But I was learning to let go. I was learning that the past didn't define me, that it didn't have to dictate my future. There were still moments when I felt a pang of regret, a whisper of doubt, but they were fleeting. I wasn't going back. I was moving forward, one step at a time. As I sat in my apartment one evening, looking out at the city lights, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the expectations, free from the judgment, free from the role I had been forced to play for so many years. I was free to be who I was, to live my life on my terms. And that freedom was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. I woke up to the sound of birds outside my window, a soft reminder that life was moving on, that I was moving on. It had been months since I left my old life behind, since I walked away from that house, and the people who had made me feel like a stranger in my own family. I still thought about them sometimes, but it no longer hurt. It was a distant ache, something I could acknowledge but not dwell on. I had spent years being their caretaker, their emotional support, their punching bag when things went wrong. But I had learned something valuable during my time away. I had learned that I didn't need them to be whole. I didn't need their love to validate my existence. I was enough on my own. The peace I had found in these past few months was like nothing I had ever experienced before. It was quiet, and it was mine. I had no one to answer to, no one's expectations to meet, no one to please but myself. And I had spent more time with people who actually saw me, who understood the value of kindness, of empathy, of genuine connection. I had found a new community, one that didn't take me for granted, one that didn't treat me like I was invisible. It was a slow process, but I had built new relationships with people who actually cared. I started seeing the beauty in the small things again. I took long walks in the park, breathed in the fresh air, and noticed the simple beauty of the world around me. The way the trees swayed in the wind, how the flowers bloomed in the spring, how the sun set in the evening, casting its warm glow over everything. For the first time in years, I was truly living. I no longer felt like I was just going through the motions. trying to meet other people's needs while neglecting my own. I was living for myself, doing the things that made me happy, exploring the passions I had put aside for far too long. One afternoon, I found myself at a local art gallery. It was a small space, tucked away on a quiet street, but it felt like the perfect place to spend an afternoon. The walls were lined with paintings, each one telling its own story, each one capturing a moment in time. I wandered from piece to piece, taking in the colors, the emotions, the stories each artist had poured into their work. As I stood in front of one painting, a beautiful landscape, I realized something. I had spent so many years letting my life be dictated by other people's choices, their needs, their expectations. I had allowed myself to become a passive observer in my own life. But now, I was ready to be the one holding the brush, the one creating my own masterpiece. I wasn't going to wait for someone else to tell me who I was or what I was worth. I was going to decide for myself. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the gallery, lost in the art and the thoughts swirling in my mind. I wasn't just finding myself again. I was creating myself, crafting a new version of who I was, one that didn't need to fit into anyone's mold. As I walked back to my apartment, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. I had spent so much of my life doing for others, putting my own desires and dreams on the back burner, always trying to keep the peace, always trying to make everyone else happy. But now, I was living for me. And for the first time in my life, I felt at peace with that. I didn't need anyone's approval to be happy. I didn't need validation from anyone to feel worthy. I was worthy just as I was, and I was going to keep walking down this new path, the one that I was creating for myself. And if anyone else wanted to join me on this journey, then they could. But if not, that was okay too. I had everything I needed within myself. The journey wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I had made the right decision, moments when the memories of my old life crept back in. But those moments became fewer and farther between. I had built something new, something that was mine, and nothing could take that away from me. I continued to grow, continued to find new passions, new things that brought me joy. I took up gardening, something I had always wanted to do, and started planting flowers in the small patch of earth outside my apartment. It was amazing how much joy I found in nurturing those plants, watching them grow and bloom. It reminded me of how important it was to nurture myself, to allow myself to grow and bloom as well. I began traveling again, visiting places I had always wanted to see, experiencing new cultures, and meeting new people. It was like I was rediscovering the world and rediscovering myself in the process. I was living the life I had always dreamed of, the life I had once put on hold for everyone else. And now, I knew that I could create my own happiness, my own future. I didn't need anyone else to give that to me. I had the power to create it myself. The phone rang one evening as I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset. I hesitated before picking it up. It was David. I had heard from him a few times since I left, but I had never responded. I had moved on from him, from all the hurt he had caused. But this time, something inside me told me to answer. "Mom, I need to talk to you." His voice was soft, hesitant. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for whatever was coming. I didn't know what he wanted, but I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked out of that house. I was stronger now. I was ready to face whatever came next. I listened quietly as he spoke, and for the first time, I felt like he was really talking to me, not just asking for something. He was apologizing, finally acknowledging the hurt he had caused. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of hope. Not because I expected everything to be fixed, not because I wanted to go back to the way things were, but because I realized that I had made it through the storm, and I was still standing. I wasn't broken. I was whole again. I took a deep breath as I sat on my balcony, looking out at the city skyline. The sun had set, and the stars were beginning to emerge, their light faint against the backdrop of the night sky. The world felt still, peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, I was at peace with myself. I had spent so many years seeking approval, trying to meet expectations, trying to make everyone else happy. But now, I understood that happiness didn't come from the approval of others. It came from within. I was no longer living for anyone else. I was living for me. The phone call from David had shaken something inside me, but it wasn't the old, desperate need for his love or validation. It was something else. It was the recognition that, despite everything, despite all the pain, I was still capable of moving forward. I was still capable of healing. David's voice had been filled with guilt, and maybe even regret. He had apologized for his role in what happened, for the distance he had put between us. He admitted that he had let me down, that he hadn't seen what I had been going through. I had listened quietly, my heart heavy, but also strangely relieved. I hadn't expected an apology, at least not one that felt real. And yet, in that moment, something shifted inside me. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about what he said or how he said it. It was about me, about how far I had come, and how much I had learned about myself. I had walked away from a life that had drained me, that had made me feel small and invisible. But I wasn't small anymore. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was strong. I was whole. I had made it through the darkness, through the loneliness, and I had found my way back to myself. I had learned to stand on my own, to be my own source of strength, to no longer wait for others to validate my worth. As I sat there, feeling the cool night air against my skin, I realized that the future was wide open. I didn't need to live in the past. I didn't need to live for the expectations of others. I had my own path to follow now, one that I was creating for myself, day by day. I thought about the future, about the things I wanted to do, the places I wanted to see. I wasn't going to wait for permission. I wasn't going to let fear hold me back. I had already faced my biggest fear, being alone, being forgotten, being abandoned. But now, I knew that I wasn't truly alone. I had myself, and that was enough. I had always been enough. And with that, I let go of the last bit of doubt that had lingered in my mind. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, to step into the unknown with courage, with hope, and with the knowledge that I was worthy of everything I wanted. The journey wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. I had spent too many years living for others, and now it was my turn to live for me. I had a future to create, a life to live, and I was going to make it the best one I could. And as I sat there, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, I smiled. I was ready for the next chapter, ready to embrace the freedom that came with letting go of the past. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and that was enough.